The first day of Senior Bowl practices is in the books, and Kristen Jones and Tvondre Sweat were identified as clear winners on day one.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers join today. You'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, we are talking Senior Bowl. We are talking pre-draft, right? In the first and second segment, Kristen Jones and Tvondre Sweat identified as clear winners on day one of Senior Bowl practices. And in the last segment, where will players like Byron Murphy, right? Adonai Mitchell, JT Sanders, Xavier Worthy, Jonathan Brooks go in the NFL draft. I give you my projections. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I think coming into this 2023 season, we had high expectations for the Texas football team. And the biggest reason for that was all of the talent on the roster, right? I think most Texas fans said that this was the most talented Texas team that we had in over a decade. And we got confirmation bias for that during the season, right? Because we were able to go into Alabama and win that game in week 2 against a top 5 Alabama team. We won the Big 12, as every Texas fan thought that we should. And we made the college football playoffs, right? We were one of the 4 best teams in college football in the 2023 season. And I think as we get further and further into the pre-draft process, we'll get even more confirmation bias that this was the most talented football team we have fielded at the 40 acres in over a decade. When you look at it, I think at least 8 players from this 2023 roster will be drafted in the 2024 NFL draft, and up to 10 players could be drafted from that Texas football team, the 2023 roster, which is huge, right? I think it'd be huge for any program to have 8 to 10 players drafted, especially for a program like Texas, who hasn't had much recent success. We did good in last year's draft, but hasn't had much recent success in terms of getting players to the league, right? And so, this draft class and just what we're doing on the field at the University of Texas is going to go a long way in terms of eliminating that perception that's been hanging over the 40 acres for a while. When you look at, the pre-draft process right now and what's going on, they say the draft starts in Mobile, right? Mobile, Alabama. Byron Murphy was scheduled to participate in the Senior Bowl, but he's nursing a late season injury. And so he will not be participating. Probably won't see him until the combine and pro days. But Kristen Jones and Tvondre Sweat are at the Senior Bowl, and they had really nice performances in day one. And then Ryan Watts is currently at the Shrine Bowl, doing his best to elevate his draft stock as well. We're going to start with Kristen Jones, who was identified as one of the clear winners on day one, right? And was our starting right tackle this season, listed at 6'5", 318 pounds with 34 and 7/8 arms and almost a 7-foot wingspan. Doesn't really mean a lot to me, but all of the NFL scouts and NFL personnel were happy with those measurements, right? His current projection, when you look at it, I would say coming into the season, I would say Kristen Jones was probably, identified as somebody who would be picked in the 5th round or later, right? Probably 5th round was, probably the ceiling. And then I think throughout the season, he probably played his way, up to maybe 4th or 5th round pick, but probably kind of stuck in the 4th, right? If not taken in the 5th. Now, the latest intel is that he is trending up towards the 3rd round, right? So I remember a time at the University of Texas where Kristen Jones being drafted wasn't even a thought, right? And now we're looking at him possibly being a day 2 pick in the NFL draft, which is crazy. So, all the credit in the world for Kristen Jones for turning it around and changing the narrative, and all the credit in the world for Kyle Flood, right? Because I've had Kristen Jones on the show, and he's attributed Kyle Flood 100%, right, into his turnaround at the 40 acres. And almost every outlet or observer had Kristen Jones as one of the biggest winners on day one. And what was impressive to me is he showed positional versatility, right? He took snaps at right tackle and right guard, right? And we know that's what, Kyle Flood values, right? Putting the 5 best offensive linemen on the football field. And, Kristen Jones played left tackle for Texas. He played right tackle for Texas. And he's showing, that he can perform at a high level at right guard as well, right? He was identified as having some of the best one-on-one sessions of the offensive linemen at Senior Bowl day one. And he was able to match up with some of the top pass rushers in the country, right? So he went against Darius Robinson in a one-on-one set for Missouri, and Robinson made a great spin move, right? It was a beautiful spin move, but Jones handled it beautifully, mirrored him really well, and stayed in front of him, right? It was a clear win for Christian Jones, definitely his best rep of the day, and one that has scouts buzzing about Jones' potential, right? That might have been the rep that got that third round talk buzzing, right? Miles Cole from Texas Tech, who Christian Jones, went against earlier in the season when Texas beat Texas Tech by 50. And Jones won multiple reps against Cole, right? No surprise, because he won those reps earlier in the season when we won by 50, right? But he did a really good job of mirroring his moves and staying in front of him with strong hand placement. He went against Justin, I'm not going to butcher his name, from Alabama, a defensive lineman. A clear win for Christian Jones. Defender tried to bull rush him and ended up on the ground, right? So he showed good strength and good feet there. Marcus Harris from Auburn. This was the only loss or L I can put on Christian Jones' resume from day one of Senior Bowl practices. But I do have to add the context that Christian Jones was at right guard, right? We know he's used to playing further out, either at left or right tackle. They had him inside at guard, so that could be a reason that, Marcus Harris was able to put a nice swing move on him, get inside, and get to the proverbial quarterback, right? That wasn't standing there. So, like I said, this was definitely a win for Marcus Harris. This was a rep that Christian Jones lost, but I do have to add the context that he was playing at right guard. He's not necessarily used to playing that position at this point. And then Javonte Jean-Baptiste from Notre Dame. This was a clear win for Christian Jones as well, who handled a bull rush from Jean-Baptiste. So I would say out of 7 one-on-one sets that I saw from Christian Jones, he won 6 of them clearly. And the one that he lost, he was playing out of position, right? Or playing out of position he's not used to playing at right guard. When we look at some of the quotes that came out about Christian Jones from day one of Senior Bowl practices, this is from Zach Selby, who covers the Washington Commanders, who are looking to take an offensive tackle in the draft or making that position a priority. One of the clear winners of the day was Christian Jones, a 6'5", 318-pound tackle out of Texas. Jones shined in pass protection, showing clean footwork, a strong punch, and physicality. Jones excelled at mirroring edge defenders and keeping himself between would-be tacklers and the quarterback. He matched up against Missouri's Darius Robinson on the final rep of one-on-one pass protection and was not fooled by Robinson's spin move. Once again, that's Zach Selby, who covers the Washington Commanders. And then we have another quote from Nick Filato, who covers the New York Giants, right? We're keeping it in the NFC East. Jones had some of the more impressive one-on-one reps on Tuesday, which says a lot about the offensive line's performance. The lightness of his feet, combined with his strength and reactive quickness, was on full display in several plays. The Longhorn tackle only allowed 1 sack and 11 pressures in 2023, with a total of 75 pressures and 13 sacks surrendered in his career. He is an older prospect who has committed 29 penalties through his time at Texas. But Jones has experience at both left and right tackle, and he has played most of his career at right tackle, the 2,492 snaps, but he did start at left tackle in 2021 with a total of 722 career snaps on the left side. So every outlet I saw, every article I read, everything I saw on Twitter, they had Christian Jones as one of the clear winners on day one of Senior Bowl practices. And like I said, all the credit in the world to Kyle Flood, all the credit in the world to Christian Jones, who is now trending to be a lock for the 4th round and could possibly sneak into being a day 2 pick in the NFL draft going in the 3rd round. All right, quick word from our sponsors, and then we get into the Outland Trophy winner, the best defensive lineman in the country this year, Tvondre Sweat. How did he perform in day 1 of Senior Bowl practices? Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a dub, or 2, or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of National Football League. And just real quick on the NFL side, for the 3rd straight game, you can get Patrick Mahomes as an underdog. That's all I'm saying. For the 3rd straight game, you can get Patrick Mahomes as an underdog. They used to say, don't bet against Brady. Don't bet against Mahomes. 3 straight games, Patrick Mahomes as an underdog. Just saying, I don't know how many times I got to say it. Right? Take advantage. All right. So Tvondre Sweat was the Outland Trophy winner, right? It's the best interior, lineman in the country, best defensive lineman in the country, All-American, and the best defensive player in the Big 12, right? Because he won the Defensive Player of the Year. And he had a really strong day in day one of Senior Bowl practices as well. Now, he did decide not to weigh in, right? So I think there's going to be a lot of attention on what he weighs in at the combine. And, I'm not sure why he decided not to weigh in, but hopefully, he's comfortable with where he weighs at the combine. And, it's a measurement that, will benefit him in the eyes of NFL scouts and NFL executives. But he's 6'4". He had 33 and 5/8 arms and an 81-inch wingspan. Like I said, doesn't mean a lot to me, but, the NFL scouts, NFL executives that are, betting their franchise, I guess, in some form or fashion on Tvondre Sweat need to know it. Current projection, I think I've seen anywhere between the second and fourth round for Tvondre Sweat currently. I've seen some people that think he should be a late first rounder. I've seen some people that think he's pretty much settled into the second round. And I think some people have some concerns about, if he's a 3-down player. And I think those are the people that have him, in the third or fourth round, right? And he didn't have as much buzz that Christian Jones had in day one of Senior Bowl practices. I think everybody, like I said, I saw was talking about Christian Jones. You could search his name on Twitter, search Christian Jones Senior Bowl, and you'll see, just how many people were buzzing about his performance. But Tvondre Sweat, definitely had a positive day one performance as well. So when you look at it, I couldn't find as many clips. I was able to find all 7 clips of Christian Jones performances in one-on-one reps, but I couldn't find too many. I only saw 2 one-on-one reps with Tvondre Sweat. Now, he did go against Layden Robinson from Texas A&M, and he manhandled him, right, on a rep, pushing him well into the pocket before throwing him down. And then he also matched up with Andrew Rain from Oklahoma, right? They did a good job of making sure Tvondre Sweat went against 2 of our biggest rivals, right, or players from 2 of our biggest rival schools. He matched up with Andrew Rain from Oklahoma on a rep. Sweat, with his natural power, was able to push Rain back a bit. But for the most part, Andrew Rain held his own, right? So I'm not sure if Andrew Rain won that rep, but it was definitely a push, right? I don't think anybody won it. Some of the quotes that came out about Tvondre Sweat, at 6'4" and around 350 pounds, Tvondre Sweat is a physical specimen, an absolute mammoth. The Texas standout is impossible to move, and he eats up running lanes. Another one, Sweat is a wall that cannot be run through or around. He can create a massive amount of power and has a surprising amount of burst for his size. As you would expect for a man of his measurements, Sweat isn't the most athletic of prospects, but his technique, his power, and his skill moves more than compensate for it. That's from Pro Football Network. And then Dane Brugler from The Athletic. He has such a rare mix of power and quickness for a player his size. Now, I know a lot of people are questioning why somebody who was clearly the best defensive lineman in the country this year and was an All-American is being talked about being a second to fourth round pick when defensive tackle is such a premium position in the National Football League. And a lot of what I've read and a lot of what I've seen from NFL people are that there are real question marks about Tvondre Sweat's pass rush ability and his ability to be a 3-down player at his size. And I'm obviously biased, right? I followed Tvondre Sweat his entire career, right? From high school to, the University of Texas. And I've seen the progression and development, and I've seen him be an absolute dog, this entire season, right? And I think regardless of what situation you put Tvondre Sweat in, regardless of what down you put Tvondre Sweat on the field, he's going to make an impact. So I do think, a lot of scouts, and I'm not saying I know more football than them, right? A lot of them have forgotten more football than I'll ever know. But a lot of people seem to think that there is legitimate concerns about, his pass rush potential at the next level, right? That he may just be a first and second down run stopper, but somebody you take off the field on third down in obvious passing situations. Like I said, I'm biased, but I have to disagree with that. Right? I think Tvondre Sweat, regardless of what situation you put him in, regardless of what down you put him on the field, he will make an impact. But I think that's also the reason why, even though Tvondre Sweat had a better season than Byron Murphy, they were both dominant this year, but Tvondre Sweat had a little bit better season than Byron Murphy. Byron Murphy is being projected higher on almost every mock draft and outlet than Tvondre Sweat, because there is real 3-down, pass rush and run stopping potential with Byron Murphy that, the NFL sees and acknowledges. Whereas with Tvondre Sweat, they're more so looking at him as a 2-down run stopper right now. So Tvondre Sweat definitely had a great performance on day one of Senior Bowl practices. I expect him to continue to perform well on day one. Hopefully he weighs in, at a comfortable measurement at the NFL Combine. But yeah, I think we could see, Tvondre Sweat be a 3rd or 4th round pick, all because there are doubts about his pass rush potential, doubts that I think eventually he'll prove wrong at the next level. A quick word from our sponsors, and then I get into my NFL draft projections where I think all 10 Longhorns possibly will go in the NFL draft. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Jace Medical. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we talk just for a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. This is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if myself, one of my family members, a significant other, coworker, a friend, just anybody I knew, or one of my kids, I don't have kids, right? One of your kids got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from the life-saving medication they needed. But thankfully, we'll all be okay because of Jace Medical. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinuses, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us. So visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. So go to jacemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. All right, as mentioned in the first segment, I think we are a lock to see 8 players selected in the upcoming NFL draft, and up to 10 players could be selected in the NFL draft, which is, obviously really good for those players, but, really good for the long-term health of, this Texas program, right? Because it goes a long way. If it doesn't squash it completely, goes a long way towards, getting rid of that narrative that we're not putting players in the league and, Texas players aren't performing at a high level in the league because, you saw Bijan Robinson, what he was able to do this past year. He's a rookie of the year candidate. And I think a lot of these 8 to 10 players that are going to get drafted in this year's draft will be some of the best players in the league at their positions moving forward. So when I look at current draft projections where I think these players will go, just based on what we've heard thus far, obviously we have a long way to go to April till we get to the NFL draft. But just based on what we're hearing right now, this is where I think we could expect, these forever Longhorns to go. Byron Murphy seems like he's becoming a lock to go in the first round. Right, I think Byron Murphy will be a first-round pick. Defensive tackle was a really important position, and as I mentioned in the last segment, everybody on the NFL side that's looked at Byron Murphy thinks he has legitimate 3-down potential. Right, somebody who can be a dominant run stopper on first and second, run downs or whenever they run the ball, and on obvious passing downs is somebody who can make pass rush impact and get to the quarterback from the interior on the defensive line, right? And he has great burst, great leverage, amazing hands, and amazing athleticism for his size, right? So he does have all the potential to do everything at that defensive tackle position at a high level. And like I said, Byron Murphy seems like he's becoming a lock to go in the first round. But of course, the rest of the draft process, pro days and combines will go a long way towards solidifying that. I think Adonai Mitchell will be a top 40 pick. I think he eventually goes in the first round, but I'm hedging my bet a little bit and saying he'll be a top 40 pick. This is a really strong receiver draft, but it's also a strong quarterback draft, right? So I think you're going to see a lot of quarterbacks and wide receivers go in the first round, but I'm not sure where Adonai Mitchell is viewed consensus amongst those wide receivers, right? So I could see a scenario where 32 players get drafted and Adonai Mitchell is not one of them, but he's still a top 40 pick, right? I don't think there's any way that we go into day 2 and he's not one of the first picks in the second round. So I think Adonai Mitchell has proved himself to be one of the best wide receivers in the country, even in a really strong wide receiver draft. And I think he'll be a top 40 pick. I'm hedging my bet there, but I do think he finds his way into the first round, even if it's at the end. I think JT Sanders and Xavier Worthy will be second round picks, right? I know a lot of people think that JT Sanders could maybe slide into the first round. It just really depends on how, tight ends are viewed in this draft, right? I think Brock Bowers is the all-world tight end prospect. I think he's a lock to go in the first round, but I don't think any other tight end is getting huge first-round buzz at this point, right? And when you look at it, I think Dalton Kincaid was the best tight end prospect last year, and he went at like 24th, 25th, right? So I don't see, even though that is the first round, right? There were a lot of questions about him going second round, but Sam Laporta was an all-pro, right? Tight end. He was taken in the second round. So I think, the tight ends will really start to come off the board then, and start, and, after Brock Bowers goes in the first round, I think the majority of the tight ends will come off the board second round or later. That's where I think JT Sanders will go. And obviously Xavier Worthy has first round speed. He has first round playmaking ability. But I think, in terms of, playing the wide receiver position at a high level, down in and down out, there's some question marks that are going to keep him out the first round, but it'll definitely be a second round pick. I think Tvondre Sweat goes in the third round. Like I said, there are some questions about his pass rush potential, but defensive tackle is too premium of a position, and Tvondre Sweat is just too good on tape to allow 96 picks to go by without taking Tvondre Sweat. And I don't think there's any way that Tvondre Sweat will be sitting on day 3 of the NFL draft and nobody called his name, right? Even if he's just a 2-down player in NFL scouts' eyes, he'll be one of the best players in the league on those 2 downs. There's absolutely no way that 3 rounds go by without Tvondre Sweat getting drafted. I think Christian Jones will be a top 120 pick, right? I'm hedging my bet there. I know there's some, intel and some buzz that he can move up into the third round, but I still think he's probably safer as a 4th round pick. Like if you were betting on it or putting your money on it or talking on a podcast that's recorded and going to be out there forever, right? I think Christian Jones will be a top 120 pick, which is something he probably didn't even expect coming into the season. So he's done a lot of really good work to improve his draft stock. I'm hoping he can get it to the third round, but I think no question he'll be a top 120 pick and will be drafted in the 4th round or earlier. I think Jonathan Brooks will be a 4th to 5th round pick. I think this is where some people or a lot of people will disagree with me, especially because how high he is on the running back boards. But I just think we've seen over time and time again that the running back position is really devalued, right? And you're not taking these running backs as earlier as you would have in the past because you can find a great running back in the latter part of the draft. Like when you look at the Chiefs, who I think will win the Super Bowl, Isaiah Pacheco, the starting running back, was a 7th round pick, and took over Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's job, who was a 1st round pick. Also, Jonathan Brooks, not only is the running back position being devalued, but he's not healthy right now, and he can't perform any football, can't do anything football related right now. And so, they say that he's supposed to be ready for training camp, but he tore his ACL in November. And if training camp starts in August, I'm not sure how that's going to happen either. You know what I mean? So I just don't see, somebody taking a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round pick on a running back who we don't even know if he'll be able to start or be ready to play at the beginning of the season, right? There's no disrespect to Jonathan Brooks. I just think those 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round picks are really valuable. And I just don't see an NFL franchise using one of those on a running back who might not even be healthy to start the season next year. So I think Jonathan Brooks will go 4th or 5th round. He'll be a day 3 pick. And then I think Jalen Ford, Jordan Whittington, and Ryan Watts will all go 5th round or later, even if they're undrafted free agents. That's what I mean by 5th round or later. So like I said, I think we have 8, Longhorns that are locks to get drafted in this upcoming NFL draft. And we will put 10 players in the league next year, whether it be from the draft or free agency from this 2023 roster, giving us that confirmation bias that this was the most talented roster at the 40 acres in over a decade. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.